Welcome to A Guide to Every Deck in EDH. Today we're looking at Kutzil Malamet Exemplar. So Kutzil is one of the new commanders from Lost Caverns of Ixalan, and it is a 3 mana green and white 3/3, and it says your opponents can't cast spells during your turn, and whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So right away, this is sort of a combination of Grand Abolisher and any of those cards that are creatures that trigger when you hit your opponents with your creatures, so cards like Tymna, Toski, Edric, etc. So, although obviously you do need to jump through a hoop in order to do that, because it only triggers on creatures with greater than their base power of power. So you do need some way of powering that up. So you're going to want effects that are either just anthems in general that make all of your creatures bigger than what they are on their base, or creatures that are by default 0 power and get plussed, or come in with +1 counters and anything like that. And specifically, this card is unique in a couple of ways. First of all, it's the first time that we've seen a Grand Abolisher ability combined with one of those other abilities. Secondly, it is a Grand Abolisher from the command zone, which we've only really seen from like Myrel before. And the combination of these two abilities means it's both a Grand Abolisher and card advantage engine from the command zone. So first of all, we've got a bunch of cards that are going to factor into our Beatdown plan. So Beastmaster Ascension, Cathar's Crusade, Craterhoof Behemoth, Elesh Norn, and Moonshaker Cavalry are all ways of pumping the team to a very large extent, which should probably just win on the spot by overrunning our opponents, but they also do factor into the second ability by making all of our hits draw cards, just in case that's not lethal it's already. Also, Saracen is just a pretty good beater for 1 mana that is also, by default, has power greater than its base power because of the pump ability, and will work with Kutzil. We also have some card draw, including like Orin, Frostfang, and Toski, because again, we're going to be wanting to play lots of cheap creatures that hit our opponents anyway. And then since we're going to be playing a bunch of cheap creatures, why not Skull Clamp? Then we've got our cards that are just straight up combo pieces. So Living Plane turns all lands into 1/1s, which combines with either Linvala, because it means that all of our opponent's lands are creatures that cannot be activated, so they can't activate any of their mana abilities, or Elesh Norn, because it means that all of the lands are getting -2 and thus die immediately. We also have Rosy Cotton plus Scurry Oak, which in combination with each other will generate infinite 1/1 tokens, and put infinite +1 counters on Scurry Oak. Cathar's Crusade also is one of our big pump effects that also goes infinite with Scurry Oak, because every squirrel that enters triggers the Cathar's Crusade to put +1 counters on everything, and thus triggers the Scurry Oak again, so it generates infinite squirrels. Although, do note that while Cathar's Crusade is mandatory, Scurry Oak is not mandatory, so you can break the loop whenever you want. And then apart from those combos, we've got a little bit of fast mana and Reprieve as a counter spell, various lands, and then we've got cards that I'm going to categorize as power over base. So these are cards that either just have a effect that makes their power greater than their base power, or it gives all creatures or all other creatures greater power than their base power. So there's cards that we've already looked at, like Beastmaster Ascension, Cathar's Crusade, Elesh Norn, Scurry Oak, and Rosy Cotton, and Serra Ascendant. But there's other cards like A Quarter Paladin and Signal Pest, which have Battle Cry, which gives +1/+0 to all other attacking creatures whenever they attack. There's Flowering of the White Tree, which is an anthem. Similarly, Always Watching, an anthem that also gives Vigilance. Elvish Reclaimer and Knight of the Reliquary are both creatures that can tutor up lands, so primarily these are going to be used to go grab Gaia's Cradle, but they also have pump effects that make their power greater than their base power. Then there's Knight of Autumn, which is in here primarily to be a reclamation stage that blows up artifacts and enchantments, but it does also have the option of coming in with +1 counters, and therefore is a creature that can technically have a greater power than its base power. There's also King Darien, which gives our other creatures +1. It also has some other abilities, but they're not very good. It's mainly in here just to be an anthem effect on a creature. And then similarly, Dawnheart Wardens is 3/3 Vigilance, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 3 or more creatures with different powers, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So another way of doing that. And yeah, those are all of like our various anthem and pumping effects. Then of course we want ramp, and we especially want ramp in the form of creatures, because we can pump those creatures and therefore make them into card advantage pieces with Kutzil. Also Feyburrow Elder, which is both a mana dork and a thing that pumps itself. Little removal in Force of Vigor, Skyclave Swords to Plowshares. Obviously we're going to have a bunch of stacks because we're a white deck, So Rule of Law effect and like Archon, Phyrexian Censor, Deafening Silence, and Aethersworn Canonist. We're playing mostly ramp that is not in the form of artifacts for the most part. So Collector Oof, Null Rod, and Stony Silence all work. We've got Gadok Teague, Linvala, Aven Mind Sensor, Boromir, and Rip as additional Stax pieces in Drannith Magistrate. And then a whole bunch of tutors, many of which are tutors for creatures, because we do have a bunch of creature-based combos, or just we can go tutor for like pump effects and whatnot. So primarily what you're going to want to do is you use Kutzil as a card advantage engine, along with a bunch of pump effects for beatdown strategies. So although there are some combos in the deck, like Living Plane, or just making like infinite tokens, the deck is primarily going to be on the beatdown plan that also doubles as a card advantage plan. And you're going to win by beating down your opponents either incrementally through cards like Cathar's Crusade, or you're just going to pump your creatures in a huge amount all at once with like Craterhoof, Moonshaker, or just make a huge pump effect with either of these cards and overrun the opponent. And Kutzil enables you to turn those beatdown plans into card advantage while also being a Grand Abolisher that really makes it so that your opponents cannot mess with you for the most part. And yep, that is going to be Kutzil Malamet Exemplar in EDH.